My name is Julia Foster, and I'm 33. For as long as I can remember, I've been the invisible scaffolding holding my family together, the one they call when this Wi-Fi dies, the passport goes missing, or the medical bills start stacking. My hands were always busy, my voice was always soft. That's been my role in our family, the dependable one, the quiet one, the extra pair of hands that lifts the heavy thing without complaint. My sister Vanessa is the opposite. She shines. She's the kind of woman my father always said was built for big rooms. Perfect hair, heels that click like a metronome, a laugh that fills spaces you didn't know were empty. Opportunities found her, recognition followed her, mistakes became charming anecdotes. My small victories? A nod, a smile, a pat on the back that never lasted more than a second. Vanessa's ordinary achievements were celebrated like fireworks. Our father, Thomas Foster, built Foster Logistics from a single truck into a regional empire. Warehouses on both coasts, contracts with companies you've seen on billboards, a fleet that ran like clockwork. He was a self-made titan, and I was his quiet shadow, the daughter who made sure the clockwork never broke. Nights, storms, missed meals, I kept everything moving. When he praised me, it was never the fanfare Vanessa received, but I learned early, usefulness is safer than visibility. Dad died in April, heart attack. The funeral was quiet, mournful, and surreal. By Monday, I found myself in a law office that smelled like old books and lemon polish. The conference table was long, dark, unyielding. Photos of ships lined the walls, evidence of the empire he'd built. Vanessa wore black as though it were tailored to announce her victory. Mom dabbed at her eyes and glanced at her phone more than the papers. The partners lined up, faces severe, folders thick. The room knew we weren't talking about pocket change. Dad's estate was tied to a company people estimated at $160 million. I sat at the end, hands folded, thinking about how his knuckles used to turn white on the steering wheel whenever the roads were slick. Vanessa leaned over toward me, whispering with that trademark smirk. "You get $15, sis." Her nail tapped the glossy folder like punctuation. The rest, she implied, was hers. I didn't flinch. I just watched the lawyer, Mr. Lawson, adjust his glasses and clear his throat like a judge preparing to pass sentence. Everyone settled in. Chairs creaked, pins clicked, lemon polish mingled with the faint smell of paper dust. He began reading the usual formalities: full name, date, last will, and testament. My eyes wandered to the table edge. Tiny dents, evidence of some absent-minded ring, seemed almost deliberate. "You get $15, Vanessa repeated under her breath, louder this time, expecting a laugh. "Because I was the sentimental one, right? Buy yourself a burger." I stayed quiet. Then Mr. Lawson paused. There was a subtle shift in his eyes, a weight that had nothing to do with the formal words he spoke. Vanessa crossed her legs and smiled, perfectly composed. I watched it fade as he continued. "And there is a second section, a codicil, executed 3 weeks before Mr. Foster's death." Vanessa's face lost color so fast it looked like someone had dimmed a light. I didn't move. I didn't blink. I waited. I wasn't always quiet. I had to learn it. Dad taught me that being useful, unnoticed, and reliable was the safer path. 4:50 in the morning, Route 9 fell through. "Can you take it?" I would grab my keys, shove a granola bar in my pocket, and go. Vanessa needed a last-minute lift to a fundraiser? I went. Mom needed the guest room painted for book club? I went. My work was invisible, but it kept the gears turning. Money passed through our house like a set of instructions. Vanessa's faucet always on, ski trips, leadership internships, apartments with doormen, while mine trickled, always with a lecture about pride. Vanessa's mistakes became stories. Mine became lessons in patience, often punished silently. I was the shadow on the ground, the one who picked up after storms, both literal and metaphorical. Vanessa got the stage, the Instagram photos, the recognition. I got locked gates, second docs, instructions, no questions. And now, sitting in that law office, I realized something. Dad had been quietly keeping score, and this $15 joke was only the setup for a much sharper reckoning. Lawson cleared his throat and began reading the conditions of the codicil. Vanessa would inherit operational control of foster logistics contingent upon repayment of any family advances or obligations over the past 36 months. Ongoing employment of Julia Foster at her current salary, with full benefits if she chose to stay. Recognition of Julia Foster as co-executive of the estate alongside the council. Vanessa sat up straight, her perfectly maintained composure cracking just slightly. A ledger slid across the table, listing the sums I had quietly fronted over the years. Co-pays, tax advances, emergency loans. Totals meticulously calculated. Mom's breath caught. Vanessa's face collapsed, then reassembled like she was trying on masks to fit the room. "There's a mistake," Vanessa hissed. "Dad paid those. That's family." Lawson's voice was calm, clinical. Attached is a ledger of advances to Ms. Foster and charges she covered. Verification required for distribution. I stayed still. I didn't speak. "You did this," Vanessa snapped at me. "You got in his ear." "I signed as a witness," I said quietly. That was all. "You let me plan everything. You—" Her hand gestured at her black dress, as if the fabric itself had betrayed her. "I floated 12 co-pays, your tax bill last spring, and a credit card minimum because you said your liquidity was tied up," I said. "The amounts are in my shoebox. If Dad multiplied it by 5, that's not on me." Vanessa slammed her hand. "You're a delivery girl, that's all you are?" "Yes," I said calmly, "and I delivered." Mom finally spoke, voice thin. "We will challenge this." "No contest clause is clear," Lawson said softly. Vanessa's chair scraped back. "I won't repay it. I built that brand with him. I earned it." "No," I said quietly. "You didn't build it. Dad did. I helped. You took the photos." Silence. Heavy, thick, suffocating. "You think this makes you equal?" Vanessa leaned forward. "No," I said. "This makes me done." "What does that mean?" Mom asked, alarm creeping into her voice. "It means I'm not your spare card anymore. No more midnight pickups. No more last-minute favors that cost me rent. No more cleaning up after your mess. I'll do my job. I'll finish my roots. I'll handle my part of the estate. But I'm not the glue." Vanessa sneered. "You can't walk from family." "This isn't about revenge," I said. "It's about closure." Lawson cleared his throat, continued reading, but I was already elsewhere, seeing the past 14 years laid bare in numbers, in missed acknowledgments, in invisible labor finally recognized. The $15 joke now felt like a relic, a reminder of everything I had accepted without complaint. And I was done. Day after the will reading, I went home and emptied the shoebox onto my kitchen counter. Receipts, invoices, notes in my careful handwriting, co-pays, emergency advances, small loans for Vanessa's brand expenses, 12 items in total. I tallied everything. $5,820. Multiply it by 5 per Dad's instructions, and it came to $29,100, plus the $50,000 immediate bequest. I had never thought of my labor as currency, but now it was a ledger, a proof of my years of unseen sacrifice. For the first time, I realized that my usefulness had value beyond praise. Vanessa didn't see it that way. She called, texted, tried to cajole, to threaten, to plead. Every attempt she made was met with my quiet refusal. I didn't answer midnight calls. I let texts sit unread, feeling a strange mixture of guilt and satisfaction. She had always assumed I would move, bend, or forgive without resistance. Not this time. Mom visited in the afternoon. She leaned against my doorway, the perfume lingering, a soft reminder of comfort and constraint. "Julia, you could fix this. Make it easier." I shook my head. "Mom, I'm not doing that anymore. I'm done pretending that making me small keeps the family together." Her eyes filled with worry. "They're family. Your sister, she's under pressure." "I know," I said, keeping my voice gentle but firm. "But the pressure isn't mine to absorb. I'm done carrying what isn't mine." She studied me, that familiar mixture of love and confusion in her gaze. I wanted her to understand, really understand, that years of silent labor, of unnoticed effort, could no longer be erased with a shrug or a smile. The next morning, I went through my daily routines with an intensity I hadn't felt before. I finished my delivery routes, returned to the small home projects I'd been delaying, organized my finances. Paying off my car, fixing the slow leak in the bathroom sink, stacking my bills neatly in a notebook. It was all ritual and reclaiming. Every action was a quiet act of defiance, a demonstration of autonomy. Vanessa called again. I let it go to voicemail. Third attempt, I picked up, voice measured. What do you want? I asked, leaning against the kitchen counter, the morning light catching dust in the air. You need to come into the office, she said, sharp, impatient. We need signatures. This isn't just about errands or family favors. No, I said simply. There was a pause, a hitch in her usual certainty. Hello? These aren't errands, I said. They're promises, and I've fulfilled them. The line went quiet before she hung up. 2 minutes later, a text. We'll cut you a check for what you fronted. Not a penny more. It's not up to you. I typed a reply, then erased it. I put the phone down and finished my route. That night, Miguel came over. My friend, my witness, my quiet confidant. He sat on the couch, a beer in hand, watching me stare at a blank TV. So, your dad left you a calculator? He asked finally. I multiplied one thing, I said, a boundary. He raised his bottle. We clinked. Silence stretched, but it wasn't awkward. It was full, complete. The ledger remained on my counter for days, a tangible proof of what I had endured and what was finally acknowledged. The math wasn't glamorous. It wasn't millions, but it was mine. Recognition, at last. Vanessa tried subtle manipulation, claiming strategy and family loyalty. Think of optics. Think of the foundation. We need to keep it in the family, she texted. I ignored it. Each attempt felt like a weak thread, trying to bind me back into a life I had finally untangled from. Mom came again, bringing tea and a soft question. Do you want us to intervene? No, I said. I've been invisible for too long. I need to learn how to stand without someone else stepping in. Even the $15 Vanessa had mocked me with became symbolic. I took it out from under the rubber mat in my van's cup holder, smoothed the bills on my kitchen counter, and let it remind me every morning of how far I'd come. A joke turned relic, turned talisman. Weeks passed. Texts decreased. Calls became longer, desperate, emotional. We miss you. Family is everything. You're breaking Mom's heart. I let them be. Silence taught me something. Being heard doesn't always require a voice raised, and strength doesn't always announce itself. At home, I arranged my life quietly. Small victories mattered. My car fixed, bills organized, a slow leak repaired. I felt the weight lift in tiny increments. My hands, scarred from years of lifting and moving, felt steadier. My routines, previously dictated by others, were now my own. One evening, I sat on my couch, ledger in hand, and reflected on the past 14 years. All the silent errands, all the unnoticed sacrifices, they had finally counted for something. And for the first time, I realized that boundaries could feel as satisfying as applause. Vanessa had learned, slowly, the price of underestimating me. She was still glamorous, still sharp, still demanding recognition, but she could not bend me to her will, and I liked it that way. Foreshadowing. I knew this was just the beginning. There would be more challenges, more emotional tests, and the subtle maneuvers of a sister who had grown accustomed to being in control. But for now, I had found quiet strength in math, in boundaries, in small, deliberate victories. The $15 was no longer a joke. It was a reminder of what I would never again accept: invisibility, exploitation, or erasure. I smiled as I tucked it away in the cabinet, the one I opened each morning for coffee. A silent vow to myself, this time, I would be seen. Weeks had passed since the will reading, and the rhythm of my life had changed. My mornings were my own. I walked the streets without headphones, letting the city's noises drift in like a new soundtrack. I noticed things I hadn't before: the way a child wobbled on a bicycle, the scent of fresh bread from the corner bakery, the quiet hum of routine. Deliveries, once a chore, now felt grounding. My hands, my choices, my pace. Vanessa, of course, had not given up. Her calls came in waves, sharp, urgent, sometimes desperate. Julia, think of the foundation. Think of the legacy. We need to keep it in the family. I let her words float past, unread, unanswered. She was a storm I had finally learned not to chase. Mom stopped by one afternoon, her perfume filling the small apartment. She perched on the edge of my couch, hands folded in her lap. Vanessa's worried. She thinks you're breaking things. I'm not breaking anything, I said. I'm building something. Me. A life that isn't defined by favors, by invisibility, by always being the glue. Her eyes softened, but worry lingered. She's your sister. You love her. Yes, I admitted, but love doesn't mean being exploited. It doesn't mean disappearing behind her shadow, not anymore. Even Miguel noticed a shift. We sat on my couch, a quiet evening ritual, beers in hand. You look lighter, he said, like you finally stopped carrying something you weren't supposed to. I am lighter, I said. But it's strange. Freedom doesn't feel loud. It feels quiet, deliberate, like breathing with the top button undone. Vanessa's next move came subtly. She posted a black and white photo of Dad on Instagram with a caption about honor, legacy, and family. Comments flooded in. Hearts, crowns, praise for her composure and leadership. She hadn't posted anything directly to me, but I could feel the pressure of her public narrative. I didn't respond. Instead, I focused on small, deliberate victories. I fixed the slow leak in my bathroom sink, stacked my bills in neat columns, repaired worn boots, paid off my car. These weren't glamorous achievements, but they were mine. Control was a luxury I had long been denied, and I savored it. Then came the subtle family maneuvering. A letter arrived from the board of Foster Logistics, urging me to relinquish co-executive duties for expediency, accompanied by a fruit basket. I photographed it and sent it to Mr. Lawson with a single line. Is this a joke? No reply at first, then a calm. Don't sign anything without me. Vanessa tried another angle. We'll call it strategic. You were overwhelmed. We stepped in. Keep it in the family. She didn't understand. The family glue role I had inhabited for 14 years was gone. No more last-minute errands, no more invisible labor. I had learned the value of my presence, and it no longer came free. Some nights I allowed myself a strange mixture of guilt and pride. Mom would call, lingering in the doorway, trying to mediate. Vanessa would text, pleading and demanding simultaneously. But I kept my boundaries. I let calls go unanswered. I didn't participate in the constant tug of war. It was strategic silence, and it worked. Slowly, the pressure lessened. Texts became longer, sadder, more emotional. We miss you. Family is everything. You're breaking Mom's heart. I let them sit. I learned that being heard didn't always require raising my voice. Strength could exist quietly, in the refusal to bend, to vanish, to comply. One evening, I sat in my kitchen, ledger in hand, counting the amounts I had quietly fronted over the years. Co-pays, tax advances, small loans. It totaled $5,120. Multiply by 5, plus the immediate $50,000 bequest, and I realized my labor had tangible worth. Recognition, finally, in numbers, in law, in a moment my family could not erase. The $15 Vanessa had mocked me with became a talisman. I smoothed it across the counter, tucked it under the cabinet where I could see it every morning. It was no longer a joke, it was a reminder that I would never again be invisible. And yet, I could feel the tension lingering like a storm on the horizon. Vanessa was calculating, and she had spent years mastering control. I knew she would escalate. I knew there would be emotional tests, subtle manipulations, and public performances designed to sway others. But I was ready. For the first time in my life, I trusted my own judgment, my own strength. I glanced at my reflection in the kitchen window, eyes clear, hands scarred, posture upright. I had learned the price of being the invisible daughter, and I had finally said it. The city outside carried on in oblivion, children on bikes, the scent of bread, the hum of cars. And I was part of it now, not a shadow, not a spare, but seen. Vanessa didn't give up. Not really. Her anger had shifted into a cold, calculated form. She began orchestrating appearances, meetings, and social pressure, all aimed at testing my limits. Every phone call, every text, every Instagram post was a subtle probe, measuring how far I could be pushed before bending back into the role I had occupied for 14 years. One morning, I arrived at a delivery stop to find a small bouquet of flowers waiting in my van. A note attached. You belong with us. Don't disappear. It was from Vanessa. Sweet, manicured handwriting, a manufactured sentiment designed to guilt me into compliance. I tossed the flowers into the trash outside, my fingers lingering on the note long enough to savor the irony. At work, my colleagues whispered about family drama, but I stayed detached. Deliveries, pickups, paperwork. I performed my duties meticulously, deliberately, as if the normalcy of routine could anchor me against the storm Vanessa was unleashing. Mom called again. Her voice trembled with worry. Julia, you have to meet her halfway. You're fracturing the family. I took a deep breath. Mom, I've spent my whole life meeting her halfway. She's never met me there. I'm done making space for someone else's comfort at my own expense. The first direct confrontation came unexpectedly. Vanessa showed up at my apartment one evening, unannounced, a black blazer and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Julia, she said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. We need to talk. You're making a mistake. Everyone thinks you're unreasonable. I don't care what everyone thinks, I said calmly, standing in the center of my living room. I care about what I will allow in my life. Her smile faltered for a fraction of a second. We're family. You don't get to just walk away. I'm not walking away, I said. I'm standing up for myself. She laughed, a brittle, forced sound. For yourself? You're acting like a child. You think these numbers in a ledger suddenly make you equal? You're exaggerating. This isn't about fairness, it's about optics. I'm not exaggerating, I said. And optics don't matter when you're the one being erased. You built a brand on Dad's back. I kept it moving when you were in the spotlight. And now I'm reclaiming my life. She paused, calculating. The air was thick with tension. I could almost see the wheels turning in her mind. A sister who had always controlled the narrative, now confronted with a truth she couldn't manipulate. You're impossible, she finally said, her voice tight, brittle. And I finally feel possible, I replied. That night, I sat with my ledger and the $15, reflecting on the slow, quiet victories I had won. I wasn't rich in millions, but I was rich in autonomy, clarity, and self-respect. I had survived years of invisibility and manipulation, and now, for the first time, I was seen. The foreshadowing of what was to come lingered. Vanessa's escalation would not end here. She would try public optics, guilt-tripping, and calculated charm. But I had learned the rules of this family, and I was no longer playing by them. Even Mom began to adjust. She no longer pressed me to forgive, to mediate, to disappear. She began to watch quietly, waiting for me to make the next move, realizing that the invisible daughter had become something else entirely, a woman who had boundaries, strength, and vision. The city outside moved on, oblivious to the private wars waged in quiet apartments and corporate boardrooms. But inside, I felt the tension finally shift. I wasn't cowering, I wasn't bending, and I wasn't silent. I had found my voice, my presence, and my space in a family that had tried to overlook me for far too long. And as I placed the $15 under the cabinet once again, I smiled. Not out of revenge, not out of bitterness, but as a quiet affirmation. I would never again be invisible, expendable, or the spare. The weeks stretched into months, and the storms Vanessa had conjured slowly dissipated. Her calls, once urgent and demanding, became occasional and tentative. She realized finally that I was no longer the invisible daughter, the spare card, the midnight courier of favors. I had drawn boundaries she could not erase, and for all her cunning, she could not manipulate me back into old patterns. Mom visited one Sunday, the air between us calmer than it had been in years. She looked around my small apartment, taking in the repaired sink, the neat ledger, the worn boots lined up like soldiers. You've changed, she said quietly, almost reverently. I've stopped disappearing, I replied, and for the first time I feel like I belong, to myself at least. She smiled, and it wasn't forced. There was a trace of pride in her eyes, mingled with the lingering sadness of family fractures that might never fully heal. Vanessa's final act came as a muted concession. She called one evening, voice tense but controlled. Julia, I've repaid what I could. The ledger, the co-pays, everything verified. I hope we can find some balance. I listened, letting the words wash over me. No anger, no gloating, just quiet satisfaction. I've found my balance, I said softly. I hope you find yours. It was a simple exchange, but heavy with years of unspoken grievances, invisible labor, and silent endurance. I hung up and felt a strange, light energy coursing through me. Closure wasn't loud. It was deliberate. In the following days, I continued my routes, each delivery a small testament to my resilience. The city felt softer somehow, the streets no longer oppressive but alive with possibility. I noticed things I had never truly seen before: children laughing on bikes, the aroma of fresh bread, the hum of cars blending into a symphony of everyday life. I placed the $15 in a new spot each morning, letting it serve as a ritual, a reminder of the price I had paid and the value I had reclaimed. It wasn't about money anymore. It was about recognition, respect, and self-determination. Vanessa eventually adjusted too. She could no longer control the narrative entirely, no longer dictate who I was or what I could be. She remained in the family, but on different terms. Boundaries respected, tension reduced, the playing field, subtly but irrevocably, leveled. Mom, Vanessa, and I began to interact with new rhythms, a fragile but growing equilibrium. Conversations were calmer, visits were measured, and there was a sense of mutual recognition without sacrifice of self. I had learned the hard way that love does not require erasure, that respect is earned through boundaries, and that being steady for oneself is as vital as being there for others. That quiet victory, the reclamation of autonomy, dignity, and voice, felt like a personal triumph. I hadn't needed to shout, to retaliate, or to perform for recognition. I had simply chosen to exist fully, deliberately, and on my own terms. As I sat at my kitchen table one evening, the city lights filtering through the window, I glanced at the $15 tucked under the cabinet. A small mundane object, yet imbued with years of struggle and endurance. I smiled to myself. It was no longer a joke, it was a symbol of what I had endured, survived, and finally reclaimed. And in that quiet, deliberate space, I felt a profound sense of freedom. Not from family, not from responsibility, but from the expectation to vanish, to be invisible, to be the spare. I was seen, I was steady, I was me.